Hello, Year 9, and welcome to today's lesson. Before you begin, please make sure that you've downloaded the advertising narrative table. And can I just say, these tables are for you to complete. I've completed part of it, as you can see. I've completed rather a lot of it, actually, but they really are for you to complete as well. And I ought to say, in the Todorov's narrative structure section, where it says point of view, obviously what we're thinking about is from whose point of view is the equilibrium disrupted. Now, that could be, in the case of the Omo advert, the housewife in the story, or it could be from the point of view of the person potentially buying the product. But please don't leave any gaps. So this is the second of our lessons on the Omo advert, and as you might have guessed, we are going to be looking at media language, and we're looking in particular at narrative. To start off with a knowledge retrieval task, I'd like you to answer the following questions referring directly to the Omo advert. Please answer in full sentences. This should take you about 10 minutes. Number 1. How are the messages and values in the Omo advert different to those found in modern adverts? Number 2. Give examples of how the advert uses signs, codes, and conventions to communicate these messages and values. Number 3. How is media language used to create a persuasive message? Number 4. How does the combination of elements in the advert contribute to a narrative? Number 5. How does the media language position the target audience, and how might today's audience interpret these signs differently? So I'd like to spend between 5 and 10 minutes answering those questions in full sentences, and then when you're ready, move on to the next slide. So these are possible answers. You might have come up with something slightly different. How are the messages and values different to those found in modern adverts? The modern adverts would never seriously imply that the washing is a woman's job, or that a woman's place is in the home, and that women should accept it. I mean, that's obviously the key thing. Although rather amusingly, that government coronavirus advert a couple of months back did exactly that. So modern adverts should or would never seriously imply that washing is a woman's job, whereas the Omo advert takes that as read. There is no challenge to that. What is effectively a stereotype, but a true and in the 50s acceptable stereotype. Number 2, give examples of how the advert uses signs, codes, and conventions to communicate these messages and values. Well, the bright colours, which imply a positive world, implies a world in which all is right, all is good, and that therefore this woman is doing something acceptable, that the woman is happy, her body language is happy. The repetition of the term Omo, bright, which is as a direct result of the woman's contribution. So there are other things you could have mentioned linked to the positive tone of the advert, and the copy basically identifying that this is what all women want. How is media language used to create a persuasive message? Well, you could have described the woman's body language, her paralanguage, her facial expression, the look on her face. You could have mentioned the hyperbolic copy, which is very over the top, very typical for the time. The emphasis on results with little evidence, and that would have had a powerful effect. It's safe to say that modern audiences would not take as read the claims that are made about Omo. How does the combination of elements in the advert contribute to a narrative? So the implicit story is that the woman has had some washing to do, and that she's used Omo for the first time, and she's thrilled with the results. And then a female friend or a mother has encountered her, and she's so excited that she can't help telling her about how great Omo is. This will shake you, and we catch her at that moment of telling about how great Omo is. How does the media language position the target audience, and how might today's audience interpret these signs differently? So we, the audience, are positioned as mother. We are someone who has not yet used OMO, and the advert is designed to persuade us to use OMO like the one we see. She, in the voice of God, in the copy, yes, she's right, try and persuade us. A modern audience would generally not accept the voice of God as trustworthy if the claims made are not substantiated. It's very hard to get rid of the sexism of the woman's place in the home implication of the main image, so we probably wouldn't buy OMO simply because it comes across as quite a sexist product. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through with you how we might apply these three theories to the advert. What you will need to do is you need to listen to what I say, and then you'll need to make notes on what I say. It should take you about 10 minutes or so. The final question, how useful are these theories in explaining how the advert works? Obviously, that's a matter of opinion. And I would like you to note down before you do a more detailed analysis, which you'll be doing in a moment, whether or not you think any or all of these theories are useful in explaining how the advert tries to sell us the Omo washing powder. So this is a slightly odd one because obviously we're looking at an advert which is just a single frame. So it could seem quite challenging to think about the narrative structure, but we can apply all three narrative theories to this advert. Binary opposites is possibly the easiest because the whole idea of any advert is that the product, the service, or whatever will make your life better. So the binary opposite is effectively your life before you use the product and your life after you use the product. So the most obvious example in the advert is this idea that using Omo will make your washing whiter, brighter, and that's emphasized throughout. The most obviously in whiteness alone won't do. So this idea that Omo will create a brighter white, which when you think about it is nonsensical. But the whole advert is designed to emphasize this idea of brightness and whiteness. So the black text of the main slogan against the white flash background, the white background to the copy and the black text on that, the black Omo logo on the white background on the box. All very clear binary opposites designed to emphasize the whiteness. So there are other binary opposites in there. You could argue that the woman in the advert who uses Omo is a binary opposite to Mother, the character who doesn't use Omo, that the women who don't use Omo are binary opposites to the millions of women who do. I mean, there is the obvious binary opposite of dirty washing, which we don't see, and clean washing, which we do. The implication that your family will be not satisfied if you don't use Omo, but satisfied if you do. You may find other binary opposites there, but those are the obvious ones. Again, the interesting thing with Todorov and applying it to a print advert is at which point of the narrative have we joined the story? And in this case, I think we've joined the narrative at quite an interesting point because effectively we're at the new equilibrium. What we're seeing is a woman who has basically completed a Todororian narrative structure. So we need to think about the story that led up to this point. So let's assume the story is this. There was an equilibrium where the woman in the advert was running her domestic life, cooking, cleaning, doing the washing, etc., etc. And the disequilibrium is a disequilibrium which is brought into her life by Omo. So Omo make her aware that her washing is not as white as it could be. So maybe she saw another Omo advert, maybe someone told her about Omo, but suddenly there is a disequilibrium in her life and she realizes whiteness alone won't do. Her washing is not as white. There are millions of other women, according to Omo, whose washing is whiter than hers. And suddenly her equilibrium has been shaken. She recognizes it and she decides to do something about it. So she goes out and she buys Omo washing powder. That's her recognition and her attempt to repair. And she uses the washing powder, does her washing, and blow me down, her washing is Omo bright. It's whiter than it was. And we catch her at that moment of recognition. And she then begins the cycle again. She tells this character, us, in the role as mother. Remember, we are positioned as mother. She's looking at us. She's talking to us. She is telling us that our equilibrium is not as good as it could be. So we, as mother, are at that moment of having our equilibrium disrupted. So hopefully here you can see how Todorov's narrative structure applies to this advert. So we have two moments. For the woman in the advert, it's her new equilibrium. For us, the audience, it's our moment of having our equilibrium disrupted. And we can only achieve a new equilibrium, a better equilibrium, by buying Omo. So I'm hopeful that having listened to what I said and had another look at the advert, it's fairly clear that these narrative theories are useful when considering how adverts work. Because at the end of the day, we tell ourselves stories. And in this case, it's a very simple story and perhaps not a very interesting one, but it is designed to get us thinking about how our lives might be better if we use this particular product. And ultimately, that's what all adverts are designed to do. Having completed that task, you should now be in a position where you can fill in the rest of the narrative table. You'll have noted I've filled in a fair bit of it for you, but I would like you to fill in some of the gaps with your own ideas. Please try and complete everything. And in the point of view box, do make sure you note down information which helps explain the point of view of the narrative. And that is, what is the theory suggesting to us about where we are positioned in relation to the Omo washing powder? How are we meant to see the Omo washing powder as, for example, the prize of Props Quest, the positive side of any binary opposite, the solution to the disequilibrium? It should take you about 10 minutes to complete that table. Then when you're ready, move on to the next slide. So having considered the elements which drive this narrative, the binary opposites and Todorov's narrative structure, is it possible that we can apply props quest and props characters to this advert, being that there is really only one character in the advert? Well, yes, I think it is possible, because actually when we look at the advert, there's a lot more going on than seems to be the case. The obvious quest is trying to have cleaner washing. And that's a quest that every woman in the 1950s who was running a household is on. And the copy makes that very clear. There is this implicit sense that you are trying to be the best in your neighborhood, that you're trying to make sure that your household is kept to the highest standards. And the quest is to achieve that because, again, implicitly, it's what your husband would expect. It's what other women in the community would expect. So there is that sense of pressure there. And the hero, the obvious hero, is Omo, because it's Omo which is the focus. But you could also argue that in some cases, the woman in the advert, she is the hero because she has achieved her quest. She's got OMO brightness. And as with many adverts, we, the audience, mother, we could become the hero if we follow the quest through and we use OMO. So who is dispatching us on this quest? Well, again, it could be the woman. She's dispatching us to buy OMO. It could well be Hudson and Knight, who are the manufacturers of OMO. We could see them as the dispatcher. And in fact, Hudson and Knight, I would say, pop up quite a lot. They're the princess's father. They are the people who have made OMO and implicitly the ones who are providing us with this quest to go out and get cleaner washing. You could also argue that they're the helper because they've created OMO, but then the woman in the advert could be the helper because she is helping us achieve this quest. False hero? Well, the false hero, I would suggest, are the washing powders that aren't the same as OMO. Fancy saying all washing powders were the same. Clearly, they are being placed as the false hero. Possibly us as well if we don't go and buy OMO. And the villain? Probably dirty clothes, I would say, and possibly us if we don't go and buy OMO. So, oh, and the princess, the prize, clean washing, I would say. So I would argue that prop is very applicable to this advert. To wrap it up today, I'd like to do an essay, and this should take you again about 10 minutes. And the question here is, how does the OMO advert use narrative techniques and the social context of the 1950s to persuade the audience to buy the product? You should refer to codes and conventions, social context, and at least one narrative theory in your answer. So basically, the question here is asking about how the advert persuades its audience. You need to apply one of the narrative theories that we've looked at in the essay. You need to explain how that fits in with the social context of the 1950s, which in this case is mainly to do with the position of women in the home. And you need to explain how that is shown using the codes and conventions of the advert. So, for example, the slogan, the copy, the use of image, the use of persuasive language, so on and so forth. So I'd like this to be at least 2 paragraphs. It should take you about 10 minutes. When you've completed your essay, please make sure that you photograph all your work, and that includes your completed narrative table, it includes your notes on narrative, it includes your knowledge retrieval task questions, and it includes this essay. Make sure that you've uploaded all of that work. Please make sure that you have uploaded it. Please don't turn in a blank assignment. That's up to you. Then, when you are certain that you've uploaded your work, please click the turn in button so that I know that you've submitted it. And then that is it.